president of Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, joins me now. So, Tom, this is a victory for you, and some critics of the former Attorney General Jeff Sessions might even say it's a victory for the Justice Department to force them to do something that maybe they should have done before. What's your thought?
You know, one aspect of this ruling is the court didn't just criticize the Obama State Department and Justice Department, but highlighted the problem of this Justice Department continuing to defend the indefensible. He specifically talked about the chicanery of this Justice Department's continued defense and excuse-making for the misconduct of Hillary Clinton and the State Department and Justice Department previously. And he also talked about not being terribly convinced about Mr. Comey's testimony about the thoroughness of his Clinton email investigation. And it shows you the value, frankly, Harris, if we could promote Judicial Watch a little bit, of having an independent group like Judicial Watch focused on this, because Congress has dropped the ball here. The Justice Department, frankly, is on the other side of this, even during this administration. And, you know, the courts have been hoodwinked here, to use a phrase that the court highlighted in his decision. And so they're not going to back down. And now some people like Mrs. Clinton potentially are going to have to answer additional questions.
You know, I am curious about one point, because we have found out recently that Ivanka Trump also had her own personal email server with some emails on it, and she has talked substantively about how all of that sits on the White House server, and that nothing had been deleted. If critics of the Trump administration question about that comparatively to Hillary Clinton and what you're seeking, what is your answer?
Well, it frankly just highlights the egregious nature of what Mrs. Clinton did when you compare what happened with Ivanka Trump, where you had some emails about government business being sent on her private account before and after her work at the White House, emails by all accounts that were captured and preserved, which is in fact what they probably need to be. There's no legal prohibition on using personal emails for government business now and again. The difference here is Hillary Clinton specifically set up an email system to make sure no emails would be captured by the government and provided to investigators as long as she had anything to do with it, until, as the court highlighted, Judicial Watch caught them.
You know, there is another difference, too, that I see that I wonder, could your FOIA or could this investigation get to the bottom of? Will we ever know exactly how many and how the emails were destroyed? I mean, we've heard all sorts of stories about this was taken out into the woods and they attacked it and that server was destroyed. I mean, what are the facts that you know so far about that? That's important. It's the deletions. It's that sort of subterfuge accusation.
Well, at least half of the emails Hillary Clinton improperly took from the White House were destroyed, about 33,000 of them. As best we can tell, because we've been getting the emails that the FBI has been able either to recover or otherwise find, the FBI has only been able to find 5,000 of them. So there are, 27,000 emails still missing. And highlights the egregious nature, again, of what Mrs. Clinton did, this massive destruction of government records. She had no business taking any of these emails out of the State Department, and she did. And the American people deserve full answers. And frankly, the court, I think, is speaking for millions of Americans and demanding accountability here. And I hope the new Attorney General is paying attention to decisions like this, because this is what's going on in the Justice Department. They're defending Hillary Clinton while attacking President Trump on specious charges.
All right. Judicial Watch, as you said, important work that you were doing. FOIA is something that journalists use all the time. We'll be watching very closely. Thank you for coming on the program.
You're welcome, Harris. Thank you.
House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is with us. First, do you have any reaction to what you just heard from John Solomon? And then I want to go to his big breaking report from yesterday.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, Sean. I mean, we have actively been looking into the Clinton Foundation, Uranium One. If you may remember that we assigned a task force leader, Peter King from New York, to look into this. So we have seen some troubling information on this, and I can't verify John's reporting. He always does a good job. He has great sources, and I'm sure there's much more to be learned on it.
Let me go back to his breaking news yesterday. What we discovered, apparently, and I don't know how this was not known when we go back 2 years now, pretty much investigating this whole issue, the Clinton bought and paid for phony dossier, et cetera. What we now have found out, there is an email chain or a chain of emails. James Comey is on it. Top DOJ officials are on it. And they knew, and the Intel community had massive questions about the veracity, the truthfulness, the validity of the dossier, which your memo and the Grassley-Graham memo point to as the bulk of the applications for the FISA warrant against Carter Page. When did you first find out about this email chain?
Well, I don't know that the email chain and John's reporting is the same stuff that we're looking at, although it sounds very similar. What we have been saying, and this is when as high as the Speaker of the House, we have been requesting for many months now, and actually talked about it on your show a couple weeks ago, that there are emails where there are redactions that we are quite convinced that if that is unredacted and provided to the House of Representatives, to the Intelligence Committee, it will be very clear that there is very much, it was very well known that there was a lot of information that was not provided to the FISA court leading up to the warrant on Carter Page. So I don't know exactly who John's sources are, but I do know that we have been trying to get these redactions from emails without looking. It's possible that we are talking about the same types of emails. It's also possible, Sean, that there's even more emails that we don't even know about. But what we are aware of, what I call the fourth bucket of information, it would be very clear that there were people within the FBI and DOJ that knew well and good before they went to the FISA court that Christopher Steele and others were up to some really bad and nefarious activity.
You're saying that these emails would be the fourth bucket, the 302s would be a second bucket, the FISA application themselves, especially the last one, pages 10 through 12, 17 to 34, then the Gang of Eight information, those would be the four buckets. What John is saying here...
That's correct. And those first three, remember, Sean, in those first three, the president has actually called to have declassified.
But he's holding it back, he now recently said.
Is this fourth bucket.
Okay, so what I want to ask you is, if they knew, and if the Intelligence Committee knew that they were questionable, that the whole dossier was questionable, and it was the bulk of the FISA applications, and they used it anyway. We know that they omitted that Hillary bought and paid for it with a footnote that said it might have a political taint to it, but they didn't say it was the opposition party candidate. Is it possible that they knew it was not true, that they gave it to the FISA court anyway, that they didn't do their due diligence, verify and corroborate it, and that they totally and completely committed fraud on the FISA court, not once but four separate times, meaning anybody that signed off on it was signing off on an application to spy on an American with evidence that they at best thought could very likely not be true?
Yeah, so remember what we've been looking at criminally has been abuse of power, whether or not there was a conspiracy to abuse power. You know about that. You've talked about that for a long time. What this gets into is this would be the first clear evidence that we have on another major crime, which would be called lying to a federal judge, which is a crime and a major crime. So that is really at the heart of this. But the people
we're talking about would be Comey.
It is the evidence that we have.
This would be Comey signing off on it. Rod Rosenstein signing off on the last one. That would be Sally Yates signing off on it, right?
Well, they're the ones that signed off on it, but they're not necessarily the ones who would have provided and doctored the information. So really the people that are culpable here are the ones who were in these discussions that knew about the information that was not provided to the court.
Even though Adam Schiff, who I have a lot of issues with, will be the chairman of the committee come January, will you still have the authority and the ability to get this information to the American people?
Yeah, I mean, the only difference is that I will be the Republican leader on the committee. The question is that the subpoena power will lay in the hands of the Democrats.
But the Senate would have the power too, as well.
Like I said, that's true. But we have also, for many months here, Sean, been willing to. We've said that, look, our investigation's over with. The White House is going to be able to declassify a lot of this information to help us out to get to the bottom of this.
All right. Congressman Nunes, you've done great work. So has John Solomon. If so, that basically what I said is true. That is, there is no equal justice, equal application of our laws. That would be shredding, literally shredding, if you're giving false information to a court to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on an American and not even verifying it. Wow.